This is Mr. Reed coming at you from S211 again. I am making a quick video about annotation acronyms. So instead of standing up there and be all boring like and teach you guys on the screen, I figured I'd just get a little video just explaining two different ways in which you can annotate. And this is broken down into a couple different systems of acronyms. So for you to be able to do this, first you need to get onto this slide. And this will help you obviously with your claim and then being able to provide evidence and then finally have a platform for your analysis for your IOCs and then any other type of analysis breakdown you need to do in the future. All right, so first I would like you to go ahead and click on the link here. It will bring you to our PDF page here. Now there are a whole bunch of different types of acronym systems here, and I am not going to be going through all of them. But they are really worth checking out. Some of these are for more formal writing. Some of these might be more for creative writing. But today I'm going to be covering DITs and I'm going to be doing TAPs. And hopefully you're familiar with TAPs. I do that with my 10th grade class. But I'm going to teach it to you guys now. And then also DITs, which is helpful for especially with diction and sound devices and looking at different means of connotation. So let's get right to it. I've already set up a page here to just sort of break it down for you as we go along. So this is from the mini analysis Great Gatsby page. This is column A or passage A, and this is for the DITs. So it's focusing on diction, imagery, theme, and style. I'm going to read real quick. Gatsby turned out all right in the end. It is what preyed on Gatsby, what foul dust floated in the wake of his dreams that temporarily closed out my interest in the abortive sorrows and short-winded elations of men. So I'm going to be going down just DITS here. The first one is, in my notes here, we have the word preyed, which obviously has its own sort of denotation. But there are a couple of examples of connotations for this word, and it also kind of comes down to perception as well. So it could be something that is parasitical. Yeah, Gatsby was a part of the problem. Again, there's some situational irony in the fact that that word is being used. He did do it to himself. It wasn't like this was haunting him his entire life or throughout the book. So there is some sort of ignorance in that statement or using that word specifically to describe Gatsby's situation, and that is reflective on Nick. The next one, another example of diction here, is abortive sorrows and short-winded elations, and again, those words can have many different meanings to them. The adjectives themselves, obviously, Fitzgerald is a man of his adjectives, and he conveys a lot of different meanings within those. So, especially when you're going through your IOC, let's say you get a Great Gatsby passage, pay attention to those adjectives because they are important. Going to temporarily closed. Both an example of imagery, also a pretty strong sense of diction. This is a sense of disgust, or at least short-term disgust, because Nick, again, is not the greatest person in the story. He's disgusted with the system as a whole, but based on his word temporarily, it means that at some point he's probably going to be coming back to this and being a part of the problem, a part of that system. Okay, so that is diction. I'm sure there's other examples, guys. This is just a very brief overview of those things. So let's go down to imagery. Foul dust floated. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. That creates a sense of imagery. It also contributes to, it could be also an example of diction as well. Themes. Let's talk about the passages in this, the themes in this passage. The first one, I think, may be self-explanatory, is the American dream, capitalism. I also mentioned gender here because it does a lot of the passages in The Great Gatsby relates to men. It seems like men are the focal point of a lot of Nick's thoughts. He omits even the concepts of women. Women are seen as relatively weak, hence Daisy, and even to some extent Jordan Baker. And then the other one, if you're looking at this from a psychological standpoint, narcissism. This is very much about the idea that, all these horrible things have happened to Gatsby. Nick obviously is absolved from these problems because he doesn't, partake in this. He's just, a bystander or pretends to be a bystander. But But again, this is all happening in Gatsby. It's everybody else's fault but Gatsby's. So again, there is that sense of narcissism within this. So that is Ditz. And again, I'm sure there's lots of other examples that we could pull from this, but this is just a very short video covering these terms. So then we go to, I'm looking at examples of style. So we're actually still on Ditz. I looked at some sound devices. We have we have floated, we have abortive, closed, short, winded, and sorrow. And I pose these questions to you. Why do you think that these words are being used, and how can we connect these to examples of themes within the actual story itself? If you look at those choices of words, and you look at my examples of themes, can you make connections to those? Going down, we have style as well. Continuing on with that, we have informal, complex, and poetic word choice. It's very respectful of Gatsby. There is some characterization there. Nick feels somewhat sympathetic to Gatsby, maybe somewhat ignorantly sympathetic. There's a short-term disgust in the system, but again, it's not a full-out condemnation of the system itself. And then we also have the choice of the word men. It's very vague. It's not entirely clear who the men are. Are all men sort of lumped together here, or is he just assuming men as being upper class? It's very vague. Something to note. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Let's go down to TAPS real quick, just a couple notes on that. So we have topic, we have audience, we have purpose, and we have speaker. Those are the acronyms for TAPS. And again, when you're going through this, you can use both of these to help you out. I've just laid these two out as a form of help. So the first one in TAPS is topic. So there are a couple different topics that we could approach this from. The first one is external conflict. Things around in the environment that are affecting the main characters. We have man versus man. The way Gatsby is done away with at the very end of the novel. Also maybe his conflicts with Tom Buchanan or Nick with Gatsby. And then man versus himself. Again, maybe it's Nick's own internal feelings. Maybe it's Gatsby's own internal feelings. This constant sense of, or binary oppositions of appearance versus reality. So Nick can't recognize that he is a pretty god-awful person himself. So that sense of narcissism playing back into this. We have a loss of innocence. We have a loss of hope in humanity as well. The audience here, now this is something that you're going to need a little bit of context and do a little bit of research on, depending on what source you get. But this was published in the 30s, the novel. And it's an audience that may be reflecting on the previous decades in mostly a negative way. These are people who may have been affected by the Great Depression. So we're looking at kind of the elaborate and almost unregulated behavior of people. Just everything was a big party, and people were sort of ignoring the stock markets, and thanks 20s for just ignoring some very basic principles on how to run a market, and it was all about get-rich schemes. So that could be a potential audience. The purpose is both situational and dramatic irony in the fact that Nick is unaware of his own faults, and then also examples of dramatic irony that play out through that passage. There's attempting to convey the hubris of Gatsby, right? Gatsby sort of avoiding his initial fate and trying to relive in the past when obviously one cannot do that. And his constant attempts to do that leads ultimately to his downfall. The effect of the bloodthirsty society, according to Nick, and then blaming everybody else but Gatsby is reflective on Nick as a person, which leads me then to the speaker. You just got to look at the diction. You got to think about Nick's perspective. If you put yourself in Nick's perspective, then you know exactly the characterization of Nick. Not a great person. So, anyways, that is TAPS and that is DITS. Hopefully this is helpful. If you have any other questions, please let me know. And make sure that you do check out these slides here, this PDF here, because there are a lot of really good and resourceful ways to annotate. It's not just using your highlighters. There's so many different ways you could go about doing this. All right, so hopefully you got something good out of this. Let me know.